So I'd like to start this off by saying a little bit about Eugenio. So he actually was working at Microsoft. He had a really great career. And at the age of 42, he decided to leave to go build his own company, his first company that he was ever starting. And so what I'm curious about is, they say that entrepreneurs are born, and you're either born with it or you're not. And, they say it's a young man's game, but his story proves that both of those things are false. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective about what led you to take that leap, and what is your perspective on that?
Thank you. Well, I'm in pretty good shape. So 42 years old is okay. I feel like 25 maybe. No, that's a very common misconception, and many people will tell you, you to start a company, you need all this energy, you need to be in your 20s, and that's actually counter to statistical data. So if you look at data, most successful entrepreneurs actually start later in their careers. And I would say it's an advantage because you kind of have some life experience. When you're young, you should be idealist and you should think about how things should be. And most of the time in the real world, things are not how they should be. And that's something that life teaches you. You go out there and you learn from maybe a difficult boss, an obnoxious customer, or somebody that is not treating you well, and that something you learn by doing over time. And so if you're in your 40s, I read somewhere, I forget now the exact age, but many people started their, some of the most well-known, recognized businesses when they were far beyond their 40s. So I guess most of you still need to wait to start the company.
And at the time when you decided to take this leap, you were sustaining yourself with your job at Microsoft.
Yes.
I heard you say it in an interview that I was watching earlier about the conversation with your wife. I would love if you could share, how that went over when you talked to her and told her you were going to do this.
Yes, my wife is amazing. We've been married for 30 years, and she's the invisible force. I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm the visible face of the things that you know about me or about our company. She's kind of the second half that is invisible. But a lot of what I've done in my life, I owe to her. I'm here because I got an opportunity to join Microsoft and move from the other side of the world. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here, because she kind of pushed me a little bit, and she's always done that. So when I was in my last year at Microsoft, I was very unhappy because I applied for a job to do what I wanted to do, which was to solve identity for developers. That's what I wanted to do. And there was this open role in one of the teams at Microsoft that built all the technology for authentication. And I applied for the job. I got a recommendation from my really good friend and a master in the domain, editorial, and guess what happened?
Rejected.
Yes, so I did not get the job. After writing 2 books about the problem, after spending 1,000 hours in the domain, so I really knew what I was doing, and I didn't get the job. And I really liked Microsoft. I stayed there for 13 years. And so I came, after my rejection, I came back home and I was disappointed, and how come, and all of that. And my wife looked at me and she said, well, what good is going to do complaining about this? This is not going to change the fact that you didn't get the job. And there was a lot of wisdom in that, because I realized that you can focus on the things that you have no control of, like getting a job. There's a hiring manager that gives you a job and that gives you okay. Or you can focus on what you can do. And what is it that we could do? She said, you're more likely to regret in life the things that you never try, as opposed to the things that you try and they don't work out, or they don't end up being what you think they would do. At least you tried. And now you know that you tried. And maybe you learned something from that experience. And that was really another very insightful comment. And so she said, do it. And she wrote actually a contract for me. So you might have read about this too. She wrote a piece of paper with like 5 sentences, like, you have 1 year to do this. That's the amount of time that we have saved for to kind of keep our life without any disruptions. I could pay my mortgage, I could pay for school, for my kids, all of that. And you have 1 year. There's were other she said, like, you have to find a customer in the next 6 months. And a few other things that are more personal. And I kept that piece of paper next to me for, the first year, and it was a great reminder, talking about focus. And I was very focused on getting all those things done. So I didn't get the customer in 6 months, but I got a waiver from her, and it worked out okay in the end. So that's the story.
Nice. And so the theme of this event is going 0 to 1. And I mean, in your case, you went 0 to 1, then 1 to unicorn. And so what I'm very curious about is that first customer. How did you land that first customer? I believe I heard that it was like a $27 that they paid you or something. So not substantial, but I want to hear about that journey, like how you landed the first customer.
So one piece of advice for all of you, if you start something, I would say it's very important to get feedback from people, from advisors, from other, people like me who have seen the movie or one movie, and they can share some of those experiences with you. But nothing really replaces your doing. And you need to get out there, and the only thing that matters in business, well, many things matter, but one of the things that matters the most is to get somebody to pay you for the thing that you're building. Whether it's a service or a product or whatever it is, that's the ultimate validation. So validation of an idea is great when somebody tells you, oh, that's a great idea. It's a little bit better when somebody maybe invests in your business, and there's some skin in the game there because they're giving you money to grow your business. But the ultimate validation is to have somebody that is willing to pay you in return for something a problem that you're solving for them. And so in my first months, I am the co-founder of the company. There's another founder. And the way we divided our work is he was focusing primarily, even though we were both engineers, he was focusing primarily on the product and building the thing. And I did everything else. So the everything else, a big part of that was selling. And getting out there in the world and getting in front of people and say, here's what we can do for you. And at that time, if you remember, like websites in the early 2013, they have like this little chat where now today it's all automated and it's probably AI powering all of that. At that time, the AI powering that, it was very not artificial, it was me behind the scenes. And every time anybody showed up on the chat with a question, I would jump in. Didn't matter the time, didn't matter. It was there, answer all the questions. And I mentioned I knew quite a bit about this problem already, so I was, knowledgeable and willing to help anybody. So I spent like hours chatting with people all over the world, random people that joined the chat on our website. And one of them was really interested, and he was asking me a lot of questions, and I couldn't type that fast. So I said, like, hey, how about we jump on Skype? At that time it was Skype. We jump on Skype and we do like a pair programming session, and I'll help you wire everything up with our service. And so we did like, I don't know, 3-hour session. Some things didn't work in our service, so I was chatting on the equivalent of Slack at that time with my team, and I was like, hey, we need to add this other thing. This doesn't work. We're debugging in real time. And of course, the customer service experience for this person was, out of the charts, because I was this person, helping you, and we got everything working, including features that were not available that we built on the spot for this person. We went way out of our way to to deliver. And so at the end of that call, he said like, well, this is awesome, it's fantastic, I want to sign up and I want to pay you, which was great. The only problem we had is that we didn't have a price. So I didn't know how much to charge. And so I came up with a number and said, well, it's $50 a month, because why not? And he said like, well, you know, I'm starting this business, I don't have a lot of money, but I really want to pay you because this is great. So how about 27? I guess because why not? And I said yes, of course, and of course we did not have a way of charging. So I told my team, I said, hey, we need a way for somebody to put a credit card here. So we configured Stripe on our system, and here we go, $27 a month. And he stayed a customer for years with us, he was one of our biggest fans, and the way we treated him, you know, put a dent in the experience, and it was a little bit of the model for how we wanted to deal with prospects and customers. And you know, I was so happy that day that I was celebrating, and I took my contract and I said, customer, and I went to see my wife, and what do you think she asked me? I said, I got a customer.
How much?
Of course. You know, how much? And I said, $27 a month. And what do you think she said?
Fantastic.
She said, she looked at me, very serious. My wife is a finance analyst, so she said, you're gonna need a lot of those. And she was right. But you know, a few months later, we, you know, kind of serendipity and keep looking. I updated my LinkedIn profile, which I have forgotten, and I said like, you know, I'm CEO, founder of Auth0. And a former colleague of mine from Microsoft reached out and said, oh, what is this thing? I'm working on a project, and he was actually working on a project where our system would be a perfect fit. And something interesting happened there, which, you know, if you're lucky, you will encounter the same, especially if you're selling enterprise software, like we did. And they loved our product. It solved everything that they needed. But they told me, yeah, but you know, you are how many people? 4 people? 5 or 6 at that time, I forget. We are an insurance company, a $2 billion insurance company. We cannot buy software from you. But we can hire you. Not as an employee, but we can hire you as a consultant. And we will pay you, you know, $200 an hour or whatever it was. It was significant money at that time, especially when you earn $27 a month. And I stood my ground. So kudos to me for saying, I said like, look, you know, I am not for sale. Everything I know, my expertise, my experience, my knowledge in solving this problem, and not just mine, the collective knowledge of our team is dedicated to solving this problem. It's in the service. And we are committed. We are in it for the long run. And so either you buy our service or you go and find somebody else. And I guess the pain for them was high enough to, and I told them, look, you're going to be our second customer, but you're going to be an important customer. So we also commit to respond quickly, be on point for every issue, respond for your feedback. If you need things that are aligned to who we are and what we want to become, we're going to do it for you. So this is going to be the best product you will find in years. And eventually I convinced them, and they signed up for the service. That was our second customer, and it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it was like a true enterprise customer multi-year deal. So I had like 2 data points. When you have 1 data point, it's kind of like an anecdote. But if you have 2 data points, it's a line. And it's already like a function. So that was a great, talking about validation, that was a great validation for me that we were onto something, because nobody gives you a couple $100,000 every year if it's not serious, if you're not solving something real. And that was the thing that essentially started our journey more as, yes, we got product, what you will encounter out there as product market fit. We identified a problem and we have a solution that was viable for the problem, and it was a sufficiently, there's enough customers here to grow the business and not produce something for 2. So, long story, but...
No, it's great. And speaking about validation, there's a lot of entrepreneurs here, or people who are at the idea stage, some of them who have already started validating their ideas. Looking back in hindsight, the idea for Auth0 seems very obvious and very brilliant. It's just like, I was listening to an interview, it's like, oh yeah, every single application in the world needs authentication. So it just seems like an obviously like big market. But most startup journeys are not like that. It's like, usually it's an iterative process of learning and failing and figuring it out until you hit product market fit.
Yeah.
So was it like that for you? You just had this, you woke up in the middle of the night with this genius idea, or how was that journey like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. No, it wasn't that straightforward for us. It was also iterative, but maybe on different dimensions. So in our case, the problem that we're solving is one of those kind of immutable problems. You will always need, any application in the world will need to know who is interacting with it, and if it's a valid user or not. My mom used to work in a data center in the 70s, and she had a username and a password back then. We're talking about, 50 years ago, and that still was required. So the way you solve the problem is what changes over time. And that's where you iterate a lot. So it's like, people need to move from one place to another place. And in the beginning, we walked and we invented trails. Then we jumped on horses. Then we created carts, and then cars, and then airplanes. And today we can be in places without actually moving to a place. You can jump on Zoom. So the way you solve the problem is vastly different, but the underlying need is more immutable. And those are really, if you find something that it's kind of in that domain, you're a little bit safe, because you know that that's not going to go away. Identity in particular was something I liked because it was very complicated. And one thing I noticed is that most people who were into the problem, they were identity and access management experts, they were actually very enamored of the problem. So if you talk to somebody in Active Directory or in one of those products, they will tell you, let me tell you about how digital signatures work, or PKIs, or all this technology that most of the world doesn't give a damn about. They need the problem solved. They don't have time. If you're a bank, your business is lending money and keeping money and wealth. If you're in real estate, it's about buildings and stuff. They all need authentication. They don't want to become identity experts. So for us, the insight and the inspiration was to actually do the opposite of what everybody in the market was doing in solving the problem. We turned the problem into like a no problem. You don't have to be an expert to do identity right. And the other insight was, at that time, maybe today is more common. You might hear about this term of product-led growth, or bottoms-up, or developer-led motions, sales motions. The pioneers of that were companies like Heroku and Stripe and SendGrid and Twilio, and all of those were like solving, kind of boring problems, but making it super easy for developers to solve the problem without having to become an expert. You wanted to host a website, you did a Git push, and it was live. That was the magic of Heroku. And 2 lines of JavaScript, and you could send an SMS message anywhere in the world, which was outstanding. 2 lines of JavaScript, and you could accept payments, in your website, which was a complicated problem as well. We said, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to we put up 2 lines of C# or 2 lines of JavaScript, and you can log in with anything. Log in with Twitter, log in with username passwords, log in with SAML, log in with whatever. It doesn't matter. It's always a login, and we take all the burden out of it. But back to your question, so you can see that it's a solved problem, but not quite, because the world evolves and changes, and so there was a time where my mom worked with a mainframe. There was no APIs, there were no mobile phones, there was nothing. The only computer was the mainframe. So the security for that thing was pretty tightly controlled. You need one username and password to do everything. We live today in a world where there's Apple phones and Android phones and tons of APIs, and now there's agents and
Smart devices.
There's thermostats on your walls that know things, and bicycles you can jump on and tell you a lot of things about your exercise. All of it's a very complicated, from a systems design, coordinating all that effort. Usually standards are necessary, but they're not sufficient, because standards by their nature, because they're created by competing entities, they tend to be pretty low common denominators and very low level, so they're complicated to deal with. And so, the underlying problem was the same. We iterated a lot on how we solved it. There were a lot of crucial moments where we have to make tough decisions, like, is it going to be on premises or cloud only? Today it's obvious that it needs to be cloud. But before Auth0, I was giving presentations as a Microsoft program manager, and I talked to customers that they looked at me and say, we will never put our username and passwords in a server that is not in our basement. Never is a long time, right? So I guess it didn't age very well for that. So things change, and we iterated a lot on that. We came into these crossroads, on premises or cloud only. And those are like, another thing you might hear often in building companies is what you focus on and what are the things that you don't do. Because it's tempting to try to solve many things, and your resources will be limited, your time will be limited, so you have to pick your battles. For our case, the problem was wide and broad, and we had customers all over the world, so geography was not a dimension we constrained our business on. We constrained our business on things like cloud, developers, the audience, who are we serving? We serve developers. We serve modern cloud applications. We're not here to secure your mainframe. That is not what we do.
Awesome. I got a couple more questions. If we have time, we're going to take audience questions. But so one, in the early days, most investors tend to think you got to be hyper-focused on an ICP, like ideal customer profile, for those who are unfamiliar. But for what you were building, the applications were so broad. So how did you figure out who you wanted to focus on, and what was that segment of customers that needed it the most, or that had the least friction to adopt?
Well, I just mentioned, right, we focused on developers. Developers was our, call. It's developers. That was true for me, for sure. Of course, I know I had a background there. I used to work, when I was at Microsoft, I worked in the developer division. No surprise. So developers were my customers. But one thing did change, and when we started the business, there was one of our first investors. He gave me a book that it was called The New Kingmakers. That was the title of the book. I guess today it's more, more accepted. But at that time it was a little bit new. Developers are famously poor. They don't have money. They don't like to pay. But typically they don't own a budget. The budget is somewhere else. But what happened is that developers were very strong influencers in bigger organizations. So if you're a product manager and with a wallet, with a budget, you listen to what your team is asking and say, we should probably use this. Because otherwise it will take me 6 months to build it ourselves. And we have more important things to do. So they listen to that advice and they pay. So we decided to focus wholeheartedly in developers. And what does it mean to be wholeheartedly focused on developers? Who is a developer in the audience? What do you like? Do you like somebody calling you and say, hey, would you like to buy this thing? No. Would you like to click on a button that says schedule a demo? That's awful. Who wants to schedule a demo? I want to see the thing working, right? So the things that we like, or at least I liked as a developer, are great documentation. I can read, I can be on my own. I want to tinker. I want to click on a button that says try or get a free tier I can use forever. Maybe limited, maybe not with all the bells and whistles, but something I can use with my hobby projects. There was once a time where we closed a $3 million annual deal with a very large software company, very famous software company. And we won that deal because the CTO of the company, who was a very famous and important person, had a side project, a pet project, and they used us on a weekend. And he said, whoa, this is amazing. He went on Monday to his company, emailed everybody and said, we're going to stop developing our identity ourselves, and we're going to use Auth0. How cool is that? $3 million. So that was the experience that we wanted to create. So we invested a lot in documentation, a lot on SDKs, and a lot on quick starts, in education. Here's how you do it, how to do it. We invested, by doing that, we ended up creating almost, inadvertently, we found a way of us being number one on every response, because that time, if you're a developer and you didn't know how to solve a problem, what did you do? You went to Stack Overflow. And I answered every question in Stack Overflow. My questions were pretty good. And I did it in a way that it wasn't like in your face, buy Auth0. It was like, well, you can do it in many ways. This is what the protocol does, but it's difficult, and you can take a shortcut with this. Oh, by the way, here's a document that explains it all. And it was a document in our website. So everybody went into our website. We developed tools that developers could use to debug for free. I knew that we won the day our competitors linked to our documentation to explain things, which is pretty cool. When you see a competitor say, the best tool for this is Auth0.com.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to see if we have time. We'll try to take 1 or 2 audience questions. So, as the founder and CEO of the company, you have to be constantly iterating on product, but also you as a CEO have to be evolving, right? Because your role is changing as the company grows. I think very few CEOs that started the company can grow into the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. So how did your role change as the company scaled, and how are you able to grow into that? And what helped you?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's true. It's doable because there's no CEOs as entrepreneurs are not really born. I mean, maybe you have conditions and things that you like, but you can become a CEO. I have no training in business. I have no MBA. I'm an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer. I started my career building hardware. And then I did computer science because the world was going towards software and computers. And I worked in product for decades before I decided to start a business, and I knew nothing about building a business. But if you are curious and you have a learning mindset and you're willing to do uncomfortable things, which I would encourage all of you to do, you can do it. It's not rocket science. It's being a CEO, it's a little bit, it's one of those things in life that are not necessarily complicated, but are not easy. So easy, simple, and difficult, and complicated, and simple are like all different dimensions. And it's not really that complicated, but it's not an easy job. And it's not an easy job because it's a little bit like, getting fit. If you want to get fit, what do you need to do? It's not very difficult. You have to go to the gym. You have to exercise. You have to eat well. You have to sleep well. They are not really very complicated things, but they require a lot of discipline and a lot of commitment and showing up. And the day it's raining, you say, it's raining. I'd rather stay home because it's warm. You need to go out and go to the gym and work out, or maybe go for a run. Anyway, that's the kind of difficulty in running a business, because you will have a lot of problems. If you do things well, the problems that you solve as a CEO are the most difficult problems that nobody else can solve. Because if you do your job well, all the easy problems are all solved by your team. You shouldn't be meddling with, this deployment failed. Let's call the CEO and see what he thinks about running this script again. That shouldn't happen. The things that happen are like, this $3 million deal is going to churn if we don't do this, or if we don't improve, if we don't deliver this feature as we promised, or we have this person that is a really very good engineer, but it's an asshole, and it really alienates everybody else in the company, and it's completely contrary to the culture of our company. Are you willing to fire somebody and potentially delay your product and not be able to deliver because it's not your company? It's not the culture you want. Those are the decisions that you will encounter. And the other decisions that you will encounter is, most people, if you're lucky and your company grows exponentially because you find product market fit and you find enough customers and you're in a group. Most executives don't have the ability to grow at the same rate. So your company grows like this, and most people grow like this. It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're not doing their job. It's that their company, they cannot keep up with the business. And the only exception is the CEO, because you can, because of the nature of the job. So there will be many times, every 3 years or so, where you will have to rebuild your team and your leaders again. And you will have to tell somebody, look, you cannot stay in this role. Even though you were great, and you were here from the first day, and you have all the loyalty, and all these amazing human qualities, but you're not the CFO, you're not the human resources leader, you're not the sales leader that we need for the next 3 years. And you have a few maneuvers there. You layer, you bring somebody with the capacity to do that, you move that person below that person, the new person, you move them to a different job, or you move them out of the company. All of them are very difficult maneuvers because it's human and there's egos in the way, and egos are always in the way. And some people are great in dealing with that, and they understand. Some people are able to put the company before themselves, and they're willing to say, yeah, I'm going to I'm not the CFO anymore, but I can be the VP of Finance and Planning. And I'm happy with that because that's what I love doing. And there's others that cannot. And that's going to be your job. The best book you can read to learn what a CEO does, it's called The Advantage. It's a very easy to read book. The concepts are so mundane that you read it and you say, really? Is this what I need to do? And that's the formula I used. The concept in that book is what I used to build Auth0 and what I used post selling the company, because I stayed in the company that acquired Auth0 for 4 years doing other things. And I applied the same concepts that I learned there. And it all goes around like how you build the best team and how you develop that team over time with all the changes that I mentioned. You know, when do you specialize? When you split somebody's responsibilities in two. When you create a customer-facing engineer that it's post-sales and pre-sales. You know, the growth of the company, it's an exercise of continuous specialization. You focus more and more and more to scale, right? Doing that too early or too late are problems, right? Common mistake is, you're 10 people and you hire Microsoft CFO. It's not the same, it's not the same game when you're running a 200,000 people company or running a 10 people startup. Most experienced executives, when they join a startup, they have, if you hire at the wrong time, they have missed expectations because they are used to a machine that is working and they're used to intervene on things that they can contribute the most, but fill in the blanks with other people. It's like the surgeon that goes to an operating room and says, I need a scalpel, somebody bring me the scalpel. In a startup it's more like a field hospital. There's no nurses, there's no nothing, there's no scalpel. Here's a pen. Operate with a pen, that's all we have. So it's more like that. Hiring in the wrong time, it's potentially a problem. So the advantage, the author is the same author who wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So it's a very well-known author, Patrick Lencioni. Highly recommend it, super easy to read, and surprisingly effective.
Amazing. We have time for one quick question. I saw your hand up very quickly. Do you want to stand up and...
Yeah. Eugenio, it's a privilege to hear you. Thank you so much for coming here. I actually used to head identity at AWS when you started Auth0. So my question is going to be personal, but I want to hear it. When you started Auth0, you were competing with AWS, you were competing with Okta as well. Microsoft is also formidable, Google too.
Yeah.
What was your secret? And you had a successful company, successfully exited. Kudos to you and the team, and Shivel and everyone else.
Thank you.
So what was your secret behind that? Thank you.
Great question.
Well, it's a shitload of work, okay? So you might think that it's, you found this thing, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, a lot of commitment. Overnight success takes years to happen. But to your question, how do you compete against Microsoft or Amazon or Google? These are behemoths. Well, if you compete on their terms, you're done. There's no way you can compete. You cannot compete paying engineers more. You cannot compete with brute force. You can't. What you do is you focus on the few things that they cannot do because of their own nature. And so one problem with companies for identity specifically, right? In identity, most of these companies build identity management for themselves. So number one customer of Microsoft Identity and Access Management is Microsoft, is Office 365, is Dynamics, it's Xbox Live or whatever. It's all those, because those are billions of dollars. So let's say a big customer for us, $1 million customer, not even that, $100,000 customer comes to us and say, hey, we would really want for you to support, I don't know, some obscure thing that it's aligned, but it's not really, it's mostly going to be used for a handful of customers. What are the chances that they go to Amazon or Microsoft and they succeed? 0. They have no chance. They know that the product, even though the product team wants to do that for the customer, that is going to pay $100,000 a year. Office 365, I'm picking on them as an example. They're always going to win. First, they need to deliver the features for Office 365 before they go to the features of everybody else. And so your advantages are those kind of things. Speed. It's the ability to do things way faster. Microsoft is going to put you, or Amazon is likely going to put, that's a great idea, Mr. Customer. We're going to put it in the roadmap. Join the customer advisory board. Why don't you join us next quarter for a conversation with another 10 customers that we're doing in Las Vegas? And he said, I have a problem tomorrow. What are you going to do for me tomorrow? We can do it. So if you encounter these big competitors, you have to find the ways that they are never going to do what you can do. There's usually a speed. Like in our case, we have customers that they didn't want to host on Amazon. And we say, that's a win. And so we say, we can host on Azure too. So we can deliver our service on Azure, and there's no Amazon for you. And there's the opposite too. There's customers that say, we don't want to deal with Microsoft. We can do it on Amazon. So I guess you could deliver some identity, potentially you can install Active Directory in Amazon, in AWS, but Active Directory is not Entra ID. And you cannot install Amazon Web Services ID in Azure. We can do it on both. We could do it on Google. So, those are the things that you have to be smart about, finding your ways and ways that they can never compete. Another great example was our hiring practices. Because, most, we can see it now, Amazon requires you to be here, in Seattle, in an office. I don't know now, 3-4 days a week or so.
5 days.
5 days a week, there you go. You can be anywhere in the world with us. At that time, we say, we find the talent. We hire for talent, for time zone, and last for zip code. Because, we have customers in Germany. We needed engineers supporting customers in Germany, in German. So yeah, sure, we hire in Germany. But you could be in, Berlin or Stuttgart or München or whatever. You don't have to be, or in Austria too. Why not? That works. Those are dimensions that you can compete very easily with all these people.
Thank you.
With all due respect, because, we recognize that, that's another common misconception that I will give you as a piece of advice. Competitors can be your best friends too. Because if you're the only ones in a market doing something, and you go to an investor and say, nobody competes with us, we are alone. We are the only ones that see this thing. There's two possibilities. Either you're a super visionary and you're seeing the world in a way that nobody else is seeing, and you're super smart, or you're crazy. And what do you think is more likely? From the perspective of an investor, You're crazy. And so they're not going to give you any money. So the best thing that can happen to you is that there are competitors. And so you go and say, no, I'm not crazy. Look, it's a big market. Look what Microsoft is doing. They have hundreds of engineers there. By the way, we can compete because we hire everywhere in the world. We can do things, we can host on Amazon. They can't. That's how you tell the story. But competitors validate the market for you. And you can learn from them on the things that they're doing that are not great. They're super complicated. The documentation sucks. All the things that, they exist as a business, that's a good thing. So, pray that they are developed. Go around looking for, if you don't have any competitors, create them, invent them.
We can drop the mic with that.